once again, we want to welcome everybody to tonight's call, the 10 Deadly Mistakes Made in Setting Up a Trust or Will and Easy Ways to Avoid Them, hosted by David Rumsey, CPA and IAR, who's also president of Pettis, Rumsey, Inc. And if you are not already a client of Pettis, Rumsey, David is a CPA. The firm is in Marysville, Washington, in Snohomish County, and David is also a writer for the Snohomish County Business Journal. You can read his column Tax Talk on, I think, SnohomishCountyBusinessJournal.com and on the website at PettisRumseyCPA.com. So tonight we're going to be talking about, again, the 10 deadly mistakes made in setting up a trust or a will and easy ways to avoid them. You should have your note sheet if you received it on the confirmation email in front of you. If you are listening live, we would ask that you have that there and take some notes. If you have a question, go ahead, write that down, and then we'll open up the lines afterward. If you're listening on the replay, you can also ask a question on the web page, or you're always welcome to give David a call or send him an email. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. David, welcome to the call.
Thank you, Jeff, and I'd like to welcome everybody who's joining in on the call this evening. I'll start off just give you a little introduction about what we're going to talk about tonight and some things that come up consistently that I'm asked about. I will tell everybody I'm not an attorney. I'm not pretending to be an attorney this evening, but I am trying to provide a little education or some information that will hopefully be helpful. So if you are working with an attorney or myself or another tax advisor, so you're aware of some of the different mistakes that people make consistently in this area. And some of them can be very easily taken care of. Others you may need some legal help with, but we see this all the time with clients that are dealing with a lot of issues just because they made some mistakes in the estate planning area. So these tips that are set up to hopefully save your family months of agony and many thousands of dollars. Things like probate, estate taxes can arise if you haven't set things up. The government can get involved in your estate if things aren't properly set up, and I know very few people that would ever say that's a good idea. Excessive attorney fees. If you leave a mess for your heirs and things aren't set up, the people that are going to win and that will eat up part of the estate will be the attorneys, because they're going to have to spend more time and effort, paperwork, filing, to get things cleaned up to meet the laws that are out there. So their fees will go up as opposed to dealing with more clean, well-organized estates. So all these problems and issues that we see coming up that are both very expensive and stressful can be avoided in many cases. So that's the good news. But there's a stunning statistic. I've read this many times, and it still blows me away, that over 70% of all Americans that die each year die without even a simple will. So the question is, why don't people take a few minutes and do a little bit of planning? There's either two reasons. They just have no idea that they could be at risk and that these problems could be out there, so just lack of knowledge could be part of the problem. Or it's we'll deal with that later, I feel good, my parents lived a long time, so I should live a long time, all sorts of reasons. No one likes to talk about their mortality, and that becomes into play as well. So at the end of the day, those are the potential reasons why a lot of people will ignore this. And bottom line is, making these mistakes could cost you or your heirs money. You've worked very hard to build what you've built over the years, and having it go away in estate taxes or attorney fees, CPA fees, where some of that could have at least been limited or minimized, it's hard to come out and say that was a good move for someone along that. So we'll start with mistake number one out of the 10 deadly mistakes made in setting up a trust or will. Mistake number one is clear-cut. It's having absolutely nothing in writing, and this is potentially the most unpredictable and costly manner in which to settle an estate. Everyone has an estate plan. You either create one or one will be created for you. and that's typically by the government, the city, the state, the county that you live in, wherever you're living in. You're potentially going to have to deal with these laws, or at least your executor or heirs will, if you haven't put something in writing. So everyone does have to deal with this one way or the other. It's just how easy you're going to make it. And having nothing in writing is basically setting up a plan for disaster. So if you're happy with your state legislature deciding who will receive your assets after you're gone and whether or not you're going to pay the maximum estate taxes, then you really shouldn't have to worry about this call because you don't have anything in writing. So what you've done is you've left it open for people to take advantage of the situation. You've basically given up control. Mistake number 2, why the state and the federal government, they love the I love you will. Most people have very simple wills. They say that when one spouse dies, all of his or her property goes to the surviving spouse, and when they're both gone, all the property tends to go to the children. It's very straightforward, and for people with smaller estates, these wills will work good for you in most cases. Still important to have these things in writing and well professionally drafted and at least at the bare minimum reviewed by an attorney in your state to make sure it'll hold up in court if there's ever any disputes. Couples, though, that have estates of $2 million or more, particularly after the year 2012, these simple wills could create an unnecessary amount of taxes, thousands of dollars that you would have. So anyone who wishes to avoid probate, this is a surefire way to fail, just having the simple will. And if you have an asset, or an estate with assets over $2 million, you potentially need to look at doing a more complex estate planning, because you can look at hundreds of thousands of dollars of estate taxes if you're in this area or more. How do you avoid this? There's a solution is to have provisions in your will or living trust agreements that create bypass trust, also sometimes referred to as a credit shelter trust, at the death of the first spouse. So whether you understand all the terms and all the meanings and definitions, the question is, if you have an estate of over $2 million in assets, you need to work to make sure that, is there something I need to do other than just have a basic will? Because by just having a basic will, that may not be enough to prevent you from having costly and expensive taxes being assessed when it didn't have to be. Mistake number 3, not understanding the implications of unbalanced property ownership. Why each spouse should own equal amounts of your combined assets. So what we're talking about here is if each spouse owns an equal amount of the property, then bypass trust can function neatly to avoid estate taxes up to $2 million of assets. However, if one spouse has all of the assets and the other spouse has only a small estate, the bypass trust effect will largely be wasted if the spouse with the lower amount of assets dies first. So the benefit here is balancing out the ownership of the assets. If one spouse has the majority of the assets and your estate's over $2 million, you could be looking at some additional taxes based on that. And so there again, do some estate planning to make sure you're taking that into consideration. Mistake number 4 is not knowing exactly what your estate planning documents will do with your assets. So this happens, I see many, many times. People will come and say, well, my will says this, or this is what happens when I die. I get a copy of the will. I'm reading through it to make sure that has happened, and everything is going okay, and they've got some coverage, and the will is up and going. Then I stumble across and say, I thought you said this is going to happen. Well, the will says this. So there's some confusion for whatever reason. So mistake number 4 is just making sure that you know what is going on with the wills. Most people think that their wills control who will get what when they die. Surprisingly, many assets are transferred based on provisions that contradict or supersede those of a will. things like bank accounts, CDs, retirement plans, life insurance policy, IRAs, real estate, and countless other assets are often not controlled by wills. In case of jointly owned assets, bank accounts, stock accounts, and real estate, they're often owned this way. The surviving joint owner often becomes the sole owner of the asset. Any retirement plans, life insurance, annuity proceeds, they go to the beneficiaries, not necessarily to who was named in the will. Property ownership forms and beneficiary designations need to be cross-matched with what your will says. So you may have thought, Susie gets the IRA, but if Tommy is still the beneficiary, even though Susie's in the will, the IRA is going to transfer to Tommy because he's on there as the beneficiary. This is another reason, and a mistake that comes up time and time again, is people don't update their wills. Things change in their lives, who they're with, for whatever reason, there could be some changes, and they're not cross-matching to make sure those changes, one, have been updated in the will and or the beneficiary notices. There's many stories where someone never got around to changing the beneficiary, they pass on, and the assets end up going to someone other than who they would have liked it to go to. So the wills and the beneficiary designations, the joint ownership on the bank accounts, the stock accounts, all those need to be tied together to make sure what you really want to happen is going to happen. Mistake number 5, improperly owned life insurance can absolutely destroy the benefits that they were planned for. Life insurance is often a significant part of many affluent estates. Many people own life insurance because it provides immediate liquidity. It will for the immediate liquidity it will provide, and because they understand that life insurance death benefits are tax-free. But they're only half right. Life insurance death benefits are not subject to income tax. However, they are subject to estate taxes if the policies are owned by the insured at his or her death. This can destroy up to 60% of the policy's values. So what we're trying to differentiate here is, yes, the income tax return that would be filed, life insurance proceeds do not even go on to the income tax return. Income tax return is just that. It's a tax return reporting your income, less expenses or deductions, and calculating what the tax is. The estate tax is the tax on the value of assets at date of death. So that's the difference. The value, so if you have a $400,000 life insurance policy, you now have $400,000 that's potentially added into your other assets for the estate. That may push you up into a higher tax bracket. It could cause all sorts of problems. So it's very important that the owners are clearly set up for the life insurance, because otherwise you're looking at potential estate tax issues that you were trying to avoid. Yes, it was tax-free for income tax, but not estate tax. A wise way to avoid this is have the life insurance owned by a revocable trust. While the needs of the surviving spouse needs to be considered and addressed, life insurance, which is intended to pass to future generations, should clearly not be owned by the insured. So in other words, if you want this life insurance money to go to the grandkids or your children, you've got to make sure it's owned and separated properly so it doesn't get sucked into the estate and therefore cause needless taxes to be paid that didn't have to be, just because of the way the life insurance is held. Mistake number 6, you're trying to take your assets with you instead of using specific trust strategies to reduce or eliminate estate taxes. There's only 3 ways to reduce estate taxes. You either spend the money, have a bypass trust, or give it away while you're alive. A lot of people, typically the self-made variety, often do a terrible job of spending it or giving away. They're just not wired that way. They're not looking to blow money. They've worked very hard. So the idea of just spending it doesn't appeal to them. They also are in a position where they may not feel that they want to give the gifts right now, so they're not looking to give it away. They don't trust that the people they'll give it to will take care of it and do the right things with it. So they're not necessarily good with that. They tend to be thrifty, frankly. But too much of this plays right into the IRS's hands. They want you to have the biggest estate possible when you die. Therefore, they get taxed at that estate at the highest rates. They want your ignorance and procrastination and paranoia to stop you from taking advantage of a whole range of laws that can result in your estate paying zero or very little in taxes and still let you be financially independent. Many times the IRS collects money that they didn't have to if there had just been some planning taken care of. The worst tax out there, in my view, is the federal estate tax. You're paying tax on assets that most likely were purchased with after-tax dollars. So it's like you're getting hit a second time. This really ticks us off, the very fact that our government taxes the estates of dead people who have simply done what the government wants to fulfill the American dream. So you work very hard, you build up these assets, and the last thing that happens is you have to turn over a percentage of it to the federal government. So we want you to work hard, invest well, and leave a legacy for your family, and that may just be as simple as working with a good quality estate planning attorney to set these things up so you're protected. Mistake number 7, lack of liquidity may force family into selling the most treasured assets at garage sale prices. Many people will create these estates of great value, which at death are very illiquid. So in other words, you have all these assets, but there's no cash. So holdings of real estate and family businesses often represent 90% of these affluent estates. But if these estates are subject to taxes of over 50%, those assets usually don't have the income coming off of them to be able to pay the tax. Therefore, they're often sold at below market prices because they have to make sure that they get the cash in order to be able to pay the estate taxes, which are generally due within 9 months of death. So we all know in a market such as the nation's been going through the last 2 or 3 years where real estate values have been depressed, and furthermore, you have to try to sell this property really quick in order to pay the estate taxes within 9 months. It's a recipe to cost yourself a lot of money. I've read stories and heard things to where years ago the Miami Dolphins had to be sold to pay estate taxes of the owner at the time. They had a huge value, obviously owning an NFL franchise. They were very wealthy, but they had no cash. They weren't liquid enough in the way things were set up. A lot of times this is where life insurance comes in. So there's life insurance that is set up that will provide some liquidity, so there's money and cash available to pay these estate taxes. So lack of liquidity can be an issue if your estate's basically made up of things like real estate or family businesses. Mistake number 8, equal distribution of assets to heirs. Most people have great love for all of their children and they want them to share equally in their estates. This is a good intent, but it's not always the best idea. Equal is not the same thing as equitable. While dozens of examples exist, a common problem and often mishandled is when a person owns a business in which maybe 1 or 2 of the kids participate, but not all of them, but they plan on giving every kid a chunk of the business, both the non-participating and the participating. This is usually a guarantee for disaster. This blunder has destroyed many more businesses and families, probably more than any other estate planning mistake. So if you have a business, a farm, or some other income-producing asset, and some of the kids are involved and some are not, don't carve it up equally between all of your children. You're much better off to give them different assets than those to try to even it out as best you can. You're just creating a problem. That's why is Bobby getting 25% of the business when he hasn't been here building it for the last 15 years. Doesn't seem very fair you're going to have problems. And if you want your legacy to be continuing that business, it's best to think that out before you just willy-nilly say everybody gets the same percentage. Mistake number 9, unknowingly saddling children with the largest debt they may ever have. The same kind of people who look at a $500 MasterCard bill and look at it and say that's way too much, often leave their children with a range of estate problems that can only be solved by millions of dollars of new debt. If they are illiquid but substantial estates, often have to borrow money to pay the estate taxes. So that's horrible. You're borrowing money to pay a tax. These borrowings come from banks or even from the government, but they all require repayment of principal plus high interest. Too often the assets which trigger the tax can't generate enough income to cover it. So we're back to that same scenario. If you've got a building, it may be worth $500,000, but if it's only generating $10,000 a year in income, it's going to be really difficult to be able to take that income and pay the estate taxes based on the value. Enormous debts are often created when children who participate in the family business are compelled to buy out their non-participating siblings' interests. This not only creates great financial pressures, but the process of negotiating a buyout can create many problems between brothers and sisters. Many families have been destroyed by such a challenge. So here we go again. We're talking about that equal distribution. Well, Bobby is not been working, so he says, I don't want to have anything to do with the business. Buy me out. Well, now Tommy has to come back and say, hey, I've got to go borrow money to buy out this 25% ownership, and one gets cashed out. They're happy. The other person now has additional debt that burdens the business as a result of this. Life insurance is frequently the best solution to these type of problems. Too often, however, affluent people and their advisors don't adequately explore this option because they just don't understand. They're not knowledgeable about it. But having a life insurance that will provide cash upon death can be a real blessing when you have estate tax issues. Even if you've done all the planning and set everything up, there still may be potential estate taxes due. So we want to make sure that you've got something in place to where if you have an estate, you've got some way of paying the estate taxes when that time comes. And life insurance is very, very nicely set up in most cases to be able to be the best solution. Mistake number 10, thinking to yourself, it's all been taken care of. Good estate planning is never truly done, and this is huge from the standpoint. Estate tax laws change all the time. For instance, you could listen to this recording 2 years from now. A lot of it will still be applicable for mistakes that are things being done. But the dollar amounts, the levels could be up or down. We just don't know. The rates could change. How certain things are taxed could change. So you have to continually review your will, review your estate plan, and make sure that if nothing else, you're at least talking to your accountant or your tax preparer. Have the tax laws changed? Is my estate plan still working? If something changes and your estate plan hasn't changed for that, we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars that could be wasted just because you didn't stay up on what was going on. That's what we're hopefully there for, that we can provide a resource to you if things change, be it both income tax or, in this case, estate tax. So I think that's very important to realize. You're never done when it comes to estate planning because there's always some changes that are out there. And even if you go a year or two where things are pretty quiet, it seems like over time it'll be revisited 2 or 3 times a decade. So in wrapping things up here, and we'll certainly open up for any questions and do our best to answer those. Most people will spend more time looking at their vacation. You hear this all the time. People will spend more time planning for 1 week's of vacation than they do for their retirement, their finances, and, of course, estate planning. When you consider yourself affluent, that's not very smart. It's very smart, however, to meet annually with your financial advisors, ensure that both your plans are current and complete. There's a test to see if they are. Will your current plans give you what you have to whom you want, when you want, in a way you want, and do it all at the lowest possible cost? If you can honestly answer yes to that question, not being out of stubbornness, then congratulations. If not, then make an appointment now to fix this problem. No one can do it but you, and you may have a lot less time to solve it than what you think. We never know what's going to happen. And the key is, if nothing else, a lot of you out there may have these plans in place or wills. Talk to your advisors. Make sure they're still up to date. Read them yourself to make sure there hasn't been any changes since 15 years ago when you drew this up. Things change in everyone's life, so it's important to do that. We could tell you stories, situation after situation, where people thought everything was taken care of and they just didn't feel like doing anything more. But what happened is the law changed, something happened in their lives, they keep putting it off, and then what they thought they had done really doesn't work at all. So the end result is the assets that they worked so hard to build up over the years tend to get taken by the government, both either on a state level or a federal level. So to me, it's really mind-boggling why some folks haven't taken advantage of looking at a plan, how they can save some money and be smart about it and protect what they worked for, if nothing else, to make sure their heirs get what they want. So the bottom line, if you're like most people we talk to, you potentially could be looking at losing many, many dollars if you head in some other direction out of your pocket and to the government or attorneys or things of that nature. So if you do nothing about it, you're taking a big chance in our view. If you look at least have it updated, at least make sure if this will and the plan hasn't been looked at within the last couple of years, that you update it sooner than later to make sure everything you want is going. Because the key with a lot of things is you don't know what you don't know, and therefore you'll have a problem when something changes and things of that nature happen. So feel free to email me, call me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Some of the individuals on the line may be seeing me anyway for their tax appointment. I'd be happy to take a few minutes to do that. But we want to make sure for all our clients that a bare minimum, you've got a written will. Instruction. It's a will that's been updated. It ties to the beneficiaries. It's in writing. Everyone knows. From a personal standpoint, I've worked with many estates, and usually it's a child or a family member that tends to be the executor. And time again, when things aren't set up properly in the estate planning area, I will have the executor to tell me I will never volunteer to do this again. It gets to be so stressful, so difficult. There tends to be family fights, things of that nature. So even if you're not worried about your estate being taxed because your estate's under both the state and the federal limits, maybe it's only a few $100,000 with some real estate, it's still a good idea to have all the paperwork and everything set up, organized, well documented, so that your executor will easily be able to distribute and do the things that need to be done without having a lot of fight. So that's all I have for tonight. That's the 10 mistakes. I have this as a PDF. I'm happy to send out copies of this if anyone's listening that wasn't listening to this live and they're listening on the recording. We're certainly happy to send all the notes and the documents so you can read it, save that, and obviously you're more than welcome to listen to the recording or any of the other webinars we've done. That they're all on the website at www.pettisrumseycpa.com. So, Jeff, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, or at least gather them and get back with people if I need to do any research and go from there.
Well, thanks, David. The lines are open, so if you do have a question, you can just go ahead and start talking, and we'll hear you.
I had one question about planning for the percentage or whatever it is. This is Elva speaking. When you want to know that you have enough to supply the percentage of or the exact amount you need for covering the state and the federal taxes.
So are you asking what the percentages of the tax rate is?
Is that how would you figure out to know that you have enough to cover it? To cover
I see. Well, that's part of the planning process. If you would look and say, okay, under current rules, and that's part of the problem because these tax rates can change year by year. But typically, for example, if your estate is just throwing easy numbers out there, $100,000 or $1 million, and the tax rate may be 15% on $1 million, then that's the type. Okay, in that case, you'd be looking at $150,000 in tax if that was the rate. If it's a $2 million estate, it may be 38%. So what you do is you look. Now, the important thing is you have to be aware of whatever state you're in, as well as the federal. So it totally depends. The higher the estate, the higher the percentage that the government can take. And that is the result of saying, okay, well, what do we need if that's how much the state taxes are going to potentially be paid or due? What do we do? Maybe we start giving away that estate. So if you get the estate amount below the minimum amount by gifting it, spending money, doing any things like that, that was one of the mistakes that people tend not to do is they want to save it. They want to be smart with it. They worked real hard to build it up, so they're not always as willing to do it. Well, they could be able to gift it. You can't take it with you. So why not maybe gift it or give it away? Charities, there's lots of things you could do to spend that money down. So maybe that's the plan. Have a good quality will in place and then keep your assets just under that by having a spending and a giving type plan to make sure your estate stays under the taxable amount. But the key is, what are all your assets? And if you were to pass today, what would that mean, in estate taxes? And then we start working from that point forward.
Is there a way to find out what the tax amount is?
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to send you the estate tax schedules.
Oh, okay.
It's similar to the income tax where between X number of dollars and X number of dollars, it's taxed at 20%. And so, absolutely, I'd be happy to get you a copy of that that shows here's the breakdowns under the current estate tax rules.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
David, I got
I'll send that out. Okay?
Okay.
If you refer to estate taxes, that's if you had, relatively speaking, $1 million, and you chose to give more to one than the other based upon their annual income, do they pay taxes based upon, if they're sitting at a 20% tax bracket, it's on the state.
You were cutting out. What I think I got from that is you're asking, so if you have, say, two children, just for an example, and one of them makes significantly more income than the other, so you say, okay, I'm going to give this more to, say, child number one versus child number two. The actual receiving of the gift is, in nearly all cases, tax-free to the recipients. But the problem is if your estate is taxable, the estate has to pay the estate taxes, and therefore that lowers what's left to be distributed tax-free to the heirs of the estate. So to answer your question, it wouldn't matter, but the problem is, in the giving, the problem is if your estate's over the taxable, you've got to calculate what the tax is, and be able to have the money to pay the estate tax, and then whatever's left can be distributed tax-free however you want.
Question I have.
Okay. So if you set up a said given will, and you refer to the estate taxes changing every year, so as a CPA, you would be able to review a given will and then make comments, I won't say direction, but I'll say comments to have a potentially alter the will. Based on
Correct. Correct. That's. I mean, there's other issues when you're looking at a will, but taxes and what the current laws are definitely should be part of what you're looking at to say, oh, wow, this just changed. You know, say, for example, they lower the threshold and say, we're going to tax estates under $1 million, and say it's $800,000. That's the new. Well, there's a lot of people that all of a sudden now have an estate tax issue that might not have had one before. They always needed to have a will to make sure everything happens the way they would want it to, and have that documented. But now, hey, this will was done with the idea that they weren't going to owe any estate taxes or very little, and now they do. For example, there's a lot of people that own property in North Dakota that 5 years ago that property wasn't worth very much. So if they include that in there, all of a sudden now there's all this oil potentially and things. If they were blessed to stumble into that, now they're potentially have millions of dollars of worth of estate based on the same piece of property before. So that's where it's important to keep things updated and to work with your advisors to make sure both legally and tax-wise that you're not going to have a surprise.
Okay. Well, that leads to another question. If you were to set up a will to the standpoint of you're now, rather than the immediate heirs being the children, you give it to the grandchildren. However, they don't have access to it until they reach a said given age, whether it be 25, 30, 40, 50, whatever that age happens to be. Do they pay taxes on that upon your demise, or
no? They do not.
The money.
When they access the money, they would. It would still be tax free. Now, over those years, that money hopefully was growing and it was making money while it was sitting there waiting for them to become old enough for you to say, okay, we believe they're responsible enough, and now they can have that. So the income that was earned would be taxable and would have to be accounted for. But the actual inheritance, I believe, would be tax-free in that case. So if you put $10,000 in, it grew to $30,000 over 20 years. That 10 to 20 or 10 to 30, that $20,000 income is going to be taxed because that's income that the investment made. But that original $10,000 is going to be tax-free. It's part of the original inheritance.
Right, but is that taxed at the demise date, or, hypothetically, the demise date, the tax is, I'm just going to pay 15%, but
yes.
At the acquisition date, it's 30%. Is it at the 10% or the 30%?
It would be at the date of death, whatever the rate is, because that's when estate taxes are calculated based on date of death. So you pay on the value, but so that yes, you'd be paying on the based on date of death.
Okay.
But that's the estate paying it, not the grandkids, because the grandkids will get what's left. Now, and that's part of the spending or gifting is if you have the ability to do it now and you're concerned about estate taxes, maybe you go fund a trust for these kids. And you put the money in now before you pass away. Once you do that, it's no longer available to be taxed in your estate.
Okay.
I believe that was like mistake number 4 or so, where people don't, they want to give the money to the grandkids or to their children, but they don't do it while they're alive for whatever reason. And you can still do these things like what you talked about. I think is an excellent point, where you can set some of these things up to where if you don't think that Susie's ready to handle cash because she's 17 and you want to wait until she's 30 or something before you give it a better chance of them not blowing the money, then you certainly you can set these things up before, and that way that money is out of your estate. So therefore it's not available to be taxed at all, and it's not taxable to her because basically it's a gift. You can give $13,000 a year to everybody, to any person out there, tax-free. You don't have to do any gifting paperwork or anything. You can just say, hey, every year I'm going to give this person $13,000 a year as a way to spend down my estate.
But they don't pay taxes on the gain in the value, whether you put it in stocks, gold, whatever it is. They don't pay taxes on that, right?
They do pay taxes on the gain, on the growth. It's just like anything else.
But is that based upon the year in which you kind of gift them the money? Choice is a better way to put it.
No, the income is taxed in the year it's earned under whatever rates the laws are at that point. So the growth is taxed. So, for instance, if you gifted 10 shares of stock and it was worth $10 a share upon the person's passing, and it doubles to $20 a share, and 10 years from now it's okay, they cash it out and they sell it, you're going to pay long-term capital gains on the $10 per share gain at whatever the tax rate is on that. But that $10 is never going to be taxed because that's what they inherited. It's only the amount that's taxed in the year of the sale.
But it would be taxed upon the current rate in which the age you set them to have access to it, if I understand you correctly.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Sorry,
okay.
I'm now.
Anything else?
Time. Nope.
Okay, well, if anyone else can think of any other questions, or
David.
Or call. Oh, sure.
David, this is Al. David.
Hi, Al.
This is Al. Alva's husband.
Yes.
I have a question. If you have a paid-up small life insurance policy, is it better to cash it in and put it into savings, or just let it accumulate?
It's the classic answer is it depends, because I'd have to know more about, because it very well could be a smart move to do that, because maybe for whatever reason it's not earning much for that, and you could get more in a different investment without taking the risk. But you kind of get into a situation, okay, what are you getting currently, and how much risk are you willing to take if you take that out? Because for a lot of these plans with the life insurance policies, it's pretty well laid out. Here's what you're going to get. And so it's pretty safe that way. So other people would say, well, that's not enough, so I think I can do better, and they're willing to take that risk. My issue is, if that money's needed for, any cost associated with the person passing, you probably want to make sure it's there for you, and that it can be done. But then there's other life insurance policies that may be going down in value over time based on the way they're set up. And so you really need to look at the policy to see if it is smart worth doing, because your policy, that could be a good idea, but the next guy, it could be a horrible idea because they'd be losing a lot of security.
An example, this is a small policy of about $4,000.
Okay.
And it's guaranteed $6,000.
Okay.
Upon death.
So basically, you have to look and say, if I cash this out, I'm going to get $4,000. Because you're still alive. And how long would it be for me to be able to build that up to $6,000? If it's put in the bank, you may not get much interest because currently, as we record this today, they're not paying much. So you'd have to obviously say, really anything. Yeah, they're paying little or nothing. So what would the question that would have to be discussed is, with that $4,000, how can we turn it into at least $6,000? Because if something happened 3 years from now and, you say, okay, well, I passed on, we got $4,000, we put it in the bank and it's grown to $4,050, it's like, okay, well, it would have been $6,000 if we kept it in the policy. So it's not big money, but at the same time, it's still money, and you want to be smart with it to make sure you're protecting it and that it'll be there if that's what it's intended for.
Well, it also would affect your income tax, right?
Not if it's life insurance, typically not. There might be a little bit of interest that hasn't been taxed, but you could find that out before you took it. But it is one thing you'd look at, but many times it's not. It doesn't affect the income tax.
Okay. All right. I was just kind of mulling that over. I've just been mulling that over, whether or not to just go ahead and do it, and then it's liquefied rather than all the paperwork that somebody else would have to do.
Right. So, those are all factors to weigh, but I don't want you don't want to cut yourself short because if it's set and well documented and organized, doing a little paperwork isn't that bad. It's just when it's not that I tell people you need to have something that your executor or person would know if something happened to you. Just something as basic as, well, details about your house. Where's your money at? So they a lot of people will pass, and the executor or the person in charge, they don't even know where to begin. They don't even know where they bank at or anything. And it makes it so I can appreciate what you're saying, trying to make it easy for someone, but just being organized and having it laid out could make it easy and still, to accomplish that, but still be smart with the money.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
David, before we wrap up, at the bottom of the note sheet on page 2, you've got a picture of a TV right there, and since it's tax time, would you want to go ahead and explain the kind of the two programs that we've got going for clients? And
absolutely. We're always appreciative of any referrals, and so to encourage people, if they know anyone that maybe we can help with their taxes, we're offering a little contest, have a little fun, raffling off a nice new HD LCD TV. Basically, if you refer somebody, we'll throw tickets in for you for referring. We've always had a program of buying the person that refers anyone lunch, so we'll send a gift certificate for one of our local restaurants as a thank you. We really appreciate that, as well as we'll throw in a raffle the new clients, so everyone gets a chance to get their name in there and a chance to win a TV. We've done this a few years ago, and people had fun with it, and was able to make a fun phone call to let them know that the person won a TV. They were really excited there. 1 year, their TV had actually just gone out, so it was really funny how the timing worked. So we really are very thankful. We also give a discount off of your tax return for doing the same thing as a new client. So we want to encourage to hopefully grow the business and help your friends and family as we've been able to help you and be there for them, as well as continue to be a good resource for you.
Great. Well,
if you'd like
David,
to know more, we'd be happy to answer any questions and phone calls, emails, or if you're coming in for a tax appointment, it's a great time to talk about any other things that are going on with you or your family.
David, real quick, what's the number to call if somebody needs to get a hold of you, or an email to send information to?
Sure. Phone number is 360-659-8502. We're open Monday through Friday and during tax season on Saturdays, usually from 8 to 5. If there is a message, so we will certainly get back to you if it goes to that. My email is david@Pettis, Pettis, Rumsey, CPA.com. So david@PettisRumseyCPA.com. And email works great if you prefer, or you can do the old-fashioned setting up an appointment as well. We're happy to answer any questions. We don't charge for quick questions. We want to encourage you and or your friends to have an open relationship, to be able to ask something without worrying about getting hit with a big bill or something. It's in our best interest for everybody that we're knowing what you're doing or what type of situation you have. That way we can plan before maybe it's too late and the year ends. And then many times we ran into that. If they'd only called and we could have talked about over a couple of minutes, it might have saved them some money.
Super. Well, David, thank you very much. We want to thank everybody that's been on the call tonight, and we'll hope to talk to you real soon.
Great.
Thanks,
everybody. Appreciate it.
And interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, David. This is Rocky.
Bye.